everybody, and welcome to an hour with Kristan Higgins on ConTinual, the con that never ends. I'm Jeanne Adams, your host, and tonight we have the absolutely fabulous Kristan Higgins, and we're going to talk books and work and life and just have a great time. So welcome to ConTinual.
Thank you, Jeannie. So nice to see your face.
Yeah, I know, it's great, and Zoom has saved my sanity.
Indeed.
So you started out in the same place I did, which is in the romance genre with the fabulous and ever popular RWA.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you get your start? What made you start writing romance?
Well, let's see. Going back in time, these many decades, I'll say that my kids were tiny. My daughter was in kindergarten, my son was in nursery school, and I had left my job at this really wonderful advertising agency. I absolutely loved working there. The job was so much fun. And I always assumed that, once the kids were in school, I would go back to advertising. But as the years of being a stay-at-home mom went on, I realized how much I loved it. And, I never wanted to be rushing home to get to my kids. And yet my husband was carrying all of the family finances at that time. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to do something to contribute to the finances. And I don't have a lot of life skills. I can take care of children. So if you're ever flying on an airplane and your baby is fussy, look for me. I can bake cookies and I can bartend. And that's about it, And then I thought, all my life I've loved romance novels. And I've always, even the bad ones I loved because I would rewrite the ending or extend a chapter or, do something different with the secondary characters. And I thought, maybe I could write a book because I've read thousands, right? So how hard could it be? So
notice that we're both laughing hysterically at that.
Yes, LOL. So I decided I would write a historical romance. I'm married to an Irishman. And one of the things that I thought at the time is I love historical romance and historical fiction. And I thought, so that's what I'll write. But what I want is a lot of conflict between the hero and heroine. I don't want it to just be a misunderstanding or, she's so perfect and he's so perfect and they just have to meet. I wanted it to be very dramatic. So I thought, I'm going to set my book in Ireland in the potato famine. And she'll be Catholic and Irish and he'll be Protestant and Irish. And there's a lot of conflict there.
Oh yeah, that's just built in.
There's a potato famine, so romantic. Her brother's in prison for IRA activity, and so I had this whole dramatic, like basically a giant soap opera set in Ireland during the potato famine, POFAM romance, we call it. And
it's a hot topic.
Yeah, forget Bridgerton, just go for POFAM and a little darker, fewer nice clothes.
Slightly darker.
So I went to this writers conference, the New England chapter of Romance Writers of America, and I was ready to pitch my book and have a bidding war ensue over an outline, I might say. I hadn't finished the book. I didn't know you had to do that. And I quickly realized that the market for potato famine, Irish Catholic, Irish Protestant romances was non-existent. That in fact, I had probably made up that genre, being the only author who was willing to go there, right? And I thought, okay, so not the potato famine romance. Let's try something else. Now, at the time, my son was 3, and so my daughter was 6. And I thought, I need to write something that everybody can read and everyone can enjoy. So I'll write a romantic comedy. And since I know small towns and grew up in a small town, live in a small town, same small town I grew up in, I'll write a small town and a romance. And it'll be funny and it'll be in first person because that just appealed to me. And I got to work. I remember coming home from that conference and saying to my husband, "The potato famine is out, and I'm going to write a rom-com." And he's like, "Oh my God, okay, all right." So I wrote what I said I was going to write, a small town romance about a regular person, because that was another thing that I found lacking in the romance world at the time. So this is like early 2000s. I wanted regular people in my stories. I didn't want super wealthy, handsome, talented people. I didn't want extraordinary circumstances. I wanted people like me and my sister and my friends, librarians and nurses and stay-at-home moms and people with regular jobs. So I wrote it, and I had some friends rewrite it, and then I sent it out for submission, and eventually got that first book published. And I have not been without a contract since then. So
Which is
it's
super
crazy.
cool.
It's crazy because I don't want to say that it was easy, because writing is a very difficult job to have. And getting published is very difficult. You have to really thicken your skin, like an iguana or an armadillo, right?
Yeah.
But that first book was very well received. I had signed a 2-book deal, and now we're 21 books later.
Wow. Now, was that Fool's Rush In?
Fool's Rush In was my first book.
Now,
And
for those of you watching, this is back in the days, as I started at also, where Amazon was it was just beginning, it was just barely the seed of it. And self-publishing was considered vanity publishing at that
well, I don't even think there was self-publishing.
other than Vanity Press. No, not there wasn't.
Right.
So you really had to go through the gatekeepers. This was not gosh, I think I'll go publish my book. This was, I got to get an agent, and I got to pitch an editor, and I've got to find someone who actually likes this concept and loves the potato famine. So what was it like for you? Now, one of the things we used to talk about back in the dark ages of 2006 was, what was it like for you when you got the call? How did you feel when we got that call from that editor that said, "I want to buy your book"?
Well, the first call I got, first I wanted an agent, because I don't like the business end of just about anything. And it sounded dirty. I don't know. How did that come out dirty?
We're romance writers. We can say that stuff and get away with it.
I don't like the business aspects of publishing. And so I definitely knew that I wanted an agent. And so I thought, I know I have a really strong book here, because it took me 6 months to write that first book and a year to revise it, because I wanted it to be as good as Susan Elizabeth Phillips or Jennifer Cruzy. And so I believed in my product. And then I started sending out cover letters to agents saying, this is a book about, here's 2 paragraphs describing it. Here's 3 paragraphs talking about me and my writing history and copywriting and all that stuff. And I sent my letter out to 20 agents, and 18 of them rejected me, and 2 I'm still waiting to hear from,
21 books later. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember one of the, I was at a conference, and I was at an agent panel, and someone asked a question of like, can you describe what you mean by fresh new voice? And the agent said, like Kristan Higgins. And I stood up and I said, "You rejected me." What do you mean, like Kristan Higgins? Coulda, woulda, shoulda. But it's a hard business, right? So if you don't have a compelling cover letter, then you're just going to get, sent to the slush pile, if that. So after like a couple of months, I thought, I still believe in the book, but I'm not getting through. I have to take a look at the process. And so I shortened my cover letter to be like 6 sentences long. And I didn't send out any synopsis and first 3 chapters the way they used to have you doing. I just said, if you're interested in seeing more, let me know. And then people started immediately wanting to see the book because I had a good, 1-line description of it and 1-line description of myself. And so I sent it out to Maria Carvena's agency in Manhattan, and within an hour or two, one of her associates wrote to me and said, I'd like to see the first 3 chapters. And then later that day, she said, send me the whole thing. And within 6 weeks, I had signed with Maria. And, so it was amazing. I had an agent. I had this New York agent, and I remember going to the city the first time to see her and how terrifying that was. Her offices are in Rockefeller Center, and she represents Sandra Brown and, like some of these really big names. And, I was absolutely terrified her. I felt like a kid being called into the principal. And she was still my agent, all these years later, 20 years later, I still have the same one and only agent. So she sent out the book to be, on submission. And she thought like, oh, I'm going to sell this thing right away. And she was wrong. Every publisher passed.
Oh my.
Except one. And there's a line in publishing, you only need one yes.
That's right.
And so I got a yes from Harlequin, from HQN Books. And that was that. I signed a 2-book deal, and I thought like, oh my God, I have to write another one. This is horrible. I earned enough to pave our driveway.
Sweet.
Right? It's really,
I'm
really
contributing. Exciting. Yeah, I know.
My sister, Jeannie, my sister said like, what are you going to do with your advance? Are you going to go to Paris or something? And I was like, oh no. No, I'm going to pave the driveway. Seems like, and have to pay extra. But, my advance did not cover the paving of the driveway. But it did set me off on this wonderful path where readers loved me. They talked about my books. I was what's called a sleeper hit, that first book. And the second book was nominated for Romance Writers of America Rita Award.
Which would have been Catch of the Day, right?
That was Catch of the Day, yeah. And it won, and so
isn't that the most thrilling thing? I mean, they've done away with the Rita now. It's a thing of the past. And that was the one thing I never got to do, was get nominated.
So it's, romance's biggest award. And no one, no 3 people in the room had heard of me and actually read the book. And there's 2,000 people in the room. And it was such an out-of-body experience. And I remember like just floating up to the stage. It was the last category of the night. Everybody was tired. And I gave a very funny acceptance speech because I had no notes because I was with like 7 of my favorite authors in that category. So I knew I wasn't going to win. So I didn't have a speech. And but it was very popular. The speech was very popular. So people were coming to me after like, I loved your speech. I'm like, oh, what did I say? I have no recollection. So that kind of viral moment, that sort of enthusiasm from the crowd, from people who felt like, well, she's funny, let me read her book. It started the momentum that really carried my career to where it is now. So I wrote romance for a while, then I kind of morphed into women's fiction, which is a denigration to both romance and women's fiction, to think that romance is somehow not real fiction, and that women's fiction doesn't have any relationships and romance in it, or for that matter, that any book doesn't have that. Right. But we are classified as romance writers and then possibly women's fiction. I recently said in an interview, what is men's fiction? Is that like Playboy? We don't have a category for men's fiction. but for women's fiction, we do. And then my latest book, which will be my 21st, is commercial fiction. So it's just fiction.
Fiction.
Yeah. So I guess I've, morphed through all that.
Now,
So,
which of your books was first to sort of go all out and start winning, or winning, not necessarily winning, I guess, or start making lists? Which one was did you build momentum, or was it with that second book, the 2007 book, Catch of the Day, or was it the next one?
I think the first time that, like, I never thought that I was going to hit one of the big lists. I was just happy to be published. I barely knew what the New York Times bestseller list was. And my fourth book was called Too Good to Be True.
Right.
And I remember my uncle called me and he said, you're the number 2 best-selling book in the country. And I said, no.
Right. Pull the other one.
Not. And he said, no. And he sent me a screenshot of something, and it was ebooks, and it was the number 2 best-selling ebook in the country. And number 1 was Shutter Island by Dennis Lehane. And number 3 was The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Oh, wow.
And so I was in between, these legends, and I thought, like, there's been a mistake,
Surely not.
It's been a mistake. My next book hit the USA Today list, and my book after that hit the New York Times list. I remember when my editor called me to say that I had hit the NYT, which is, the brass ring for all of us writers.
Right.
It has magical math.
Yes.
You can sell a lot of books and not hit the New York Times list.
Yes.
But it still has that panache of
It
saying
does.
New York Times. So she called me, and I hung up on her because someone's pranking me. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine, bye. And then she called me back like, no, Kristan, it's really Tara. And you're my new favorite New York Times bestseller. And I was just silent. Just and she said, we're sending you over like next week's list. And so there it was. The list at the time had 25 slots, and my book was number 21.
Oh.
But there it was, on the list. I printed it out and I ran over to my mother's house. And I said, like, Mommy, look, I'm a New York Times bestseller. And she put it on the fridge like I was in kindergarten and made a cute drawing,
That's so awesome.
It was amazing. And then for years thereafter, my mass market books were on the NYT. And I tell you, it does not get old. It doesn't matter that their math is wonky and the list is curated. USA Today and the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Publishers Weekly, like, it's just so amazing. It's so surreal, and you never take it for granted. I don't know any author who does. And most of us authors, we seem to be like insecure at some level, like, well, I'm glad you liked this book because it's trash and I just tricked you into liking it,
I don't know if I'll ever be able to do it again.
Right. I've been saying that since my second book, like, nothing will ever be as good as the last book. So that it's just so thrilling and so exciting. And, when you get the call from your editor, you get the list and the whole team is cheering for you. It's really thrilling. And it's so much fun to tell my kids who grew up with me as an author, and my son is especially blasé about it, And one time he was in Target and there was a promotion they had a big board, big TV board. And it was like, hi, I'm New York Times bestselling author Kristan Higgins. And he said very casually, like, oh, that's my mom. And his friend was like, your mom is an author? I didn't mention that. But I love to tell the kids, like, oh, Mommy got a starred review or hit a bestseller list, that's real.
Yeah. That never gets old.
And, it's the reward for 10 months of slogging through a book that you think you cannot be saved, was a horrible idea, that you never should have started.
Yeah.
So that's my process anyway.
Well, I think one of the things that you do so brilliantly is you make your characters very three-dimensional and very relatable. It's like you said at the beginning of the interview, they're people that you know. They're people that you sit next to on the bus or sit next to, they're in the next office, or they work at the bank, or they're people you run into in your everyday life and are so relatable that I think all of us who read your books go, yeah, that I could either be that, or I know that, or I've lived that, or, and especially in a small town, small towns are such peculiar animals in that everybody knows everybody's business, but there are so many secrets that nobody knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's super fun, both as a reader and a writer, but as a reader of your books, to explore that town with you, especially the Blue Heron series, where you get all these different family members and the way things interplay and the way, like I said, everybody thinks they know everybody, and then they don't.
Yeah, I love writing families, and as an extension, the town that the family lives in. And as I said earlier in the interview, I grew up in a small town, where you did know everyone in your class and their parents by sight, and you'd walk into the post office and people know you and comment on, oh, sorry about your grandfather or something like that. You have no secrets except for your secrets, right?
Right.
And but I also love the aspect of family where two people can grow up with the same parents in the same house in the same time and have completely different experiences of the family and of relationships. And the Blue Heron is the one true series that I have written, and it's 5 books. And it was based around the Holland family in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region. And the Holland family owns a vineyard called Blue Heron. And the first character in the story is the youngest sister who comes back to town. That old saying, there's only 2 plots in a world: someone leaves town or someone comes to town.
Right.
So Faith comes to town. And we experienced the Holland family and the town, the fictional town of Manningsport, through her eyes, as someone who grew up there as a rather privileged kid, but had suffered a tragedy in the loss of her mother in a car accident during which she was in the car. The guilt that she carries about that, the reparation that she thinks she has to make, and the way she sees her other family members. And then the next story is her sister, who has come across one way in book 1, but is suddenly much more three-dimensional in book 2. When you see, okay, this is the daughter who never left, the daughter who stayed, the daughter who's closer to the father than the mother, and how she sees her younger sister. And I just love that. I think people are infinitely interesting, and they all have a novel-worthy life and a period of their life where something dramatic happened that changed the course of their lives.
Yeah.
So
sometimes that's choices, and sometimes that's circumstances.
Right. And I always say the best quality of a writer is to be a listener. So, to hear people, to really listen to that, irritating great aunt who talks too much, to get to know her and find out she has an utterly fascinating story. Or one of my books was inspired by a woman sitting across from me on the train. I was coming back from a Yankees game. And she was on the phone with her boyfriend and begging him to explain why he had broken up with her when they had been so happy, and she just didn't understand. And I it was those seats where you're facing each other.
Yeah.
And I was saying, like, hang up, honey, hang up, and I was handing her tissues, because I'm the kind of mom who always has tissues in my bag,
of course.
and just telling her to hang up, he's not worth it. And but I just thought, like, imagine being so heartbroken that you don't mind bearing your secrets in front of a carriage full of people on Metro North. You're just so heartbroken. It's so important in that moment, and all you do anything to have him take you back. And I've been that girl, and I'm glad not to be that woman.
Yeah.
um, but she inspired a book. I
Yeah.
just thought, imagine what led up to that moment, what went so wrong. So I love to talk to people. My kids always joke that I can't get on an airplane without leaving with a best friend, and um, you know my daughter said recently, like, you don't have to be so nice to everybody. I'm like, what? Who raised you? Of course I do. And by the
Well, and
way,
I think one of the things that people appreciate and love about your book so much too is not only that kind of relatability, but you always seem to use a pet or a family sort of creature in your
yeah,
books and I think people relate really well to that too.
yeah.
Is there some, I mean, obviously you have pets and we were talking.
My cat is lying on my lap right now. And my dog is downstairs waiting for me to sit in the chair so he can join me. He just stares at my easy chair, waiting for me to get in it because he can only sit in it with me. Yeah, I again, like, write what I am an animal lover. I love children. Again, my kid's nickname for me is Creepy Baby Lady because I can't not stop at a carriage and say, like, oh, look at your baby, he's so beautiful. But the pet aspect to me, it seems like a gimmick, and for some writers it might be, but for me, the pet you choose and the way you treat your pet reflects a lot about your personality and character. So I don't just gratuitously stick a dog in. I mostly have dogs. I think I've had a few cats, but in addition to dogs. And it says something about what you were drawn to. Was it the big, goofy, lovable dog, or was it the shy, abused dog who wouldn't let anyone pet her? Um, in my book, Pack Up the Moon, my most recent book, the couple has a dog that they get as a puppy, and Lauren, there's no secret, Lauren in this book has a terminal disease, and when she dies, she kind of leaves her dog with her husband, and he resents that dog for outliving his wife, and just doesn't really have the kind of bond with the dog that she had. And throughout the book, that's emblematic of his state of mind, his emotional state, his challenges of being on the spectrum. So it's very carefully chosen, Jeannie. It's not just like, oh, what dog is cute this year, let me stick that dog in my book.
Right.
I think an animal relationship is one of mutual unconditional love. uh, if you are a pet owner and your dog barfs up something, you clean it up, and if you have an old cat with seizures peeing on your bed, you deal with it.
Yeah.
Because that pet gave you so much love and so much comfort that you don't mind doing all that. You don't look at it as a burden. And if you do, I mean, that says something about you too. I would never write the point of view of that person,
Right.
you know,
Right.
because I write about, decent people.
But in your books, the pets become both a character in and of themselves in many of the books, but they also are frequently, the companion upon the journey.
Right.
That gives a lot of insight, like you said, into the emotions and cares of the person whose point of view we're in, or sometimes, like you say, how the pet is viewed is how the person is viewed.
Yeah.
And it really is a wonderful foil generally for your characters as to see who they are. It's just a wonderfully cool way of showing a different facet of your characters. And I've always appreciated that about your books, because the pets in them are integral to the stories, but they're also integral in the sense of showing who these people really are,
Right.
and how their hearts work.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for picking up on that.
And well, it's just a lovely thing that you do, and it makes those people that much more three-dimensional when you see how they react and how they interact with not only their own pets, if that's the person in the story, but if they're the person coming into the story, either the hero or the heroine, how they react to the
Right. Right.
pet. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you were talking earlier a little bit about making friends on airplanes and being the one that talks to everybody. And I know you said your kids, you don't have to be that friendly. My husband says that to me in the grocery store. Can we go now? Don't talk to people. You, with a friend, do a fabulous podcast, but it's called Crappy Friends.
Yes. Yes. That is a labor of love. My friend, one of my very best friends, Joss Day, who is a fellow author, we became close. We were always, friendly since the day we met. But I remember distinctly, there was a summer day when we were talking on the phone, and we confessed to each other that we had been in a bad friendship. And it was so intense and so relieving to hear that another woman was dumped by a female friend, or was in a relationship with a problematic friend. And it was really what made us go from being friendly acquaintances to friends and eventually best friends. This confession of, like, we'd had similar experiences where we thought we had a really good friend and we had put a lot into this friendship, and then the friend turned on us and we were so stunned and so surprised, and we started just talking about it. It kind of became almost like, I don't want to say obsession, but a topic we were both fascinated by, this complex, intricate world of female friendships in which society tells us you are friends to the grave if you are a woman who has a woman friend. You are a steel magnolia. You are there through thick and thin. Your first friend from kindergarten is going to be your maid of honor, is going to be your child's godmother, is going to be there holding your hand when you slip away. And
whether it's good for you or not.
That's not necessarily true.
Right.
Friendships end. Sometimes we give our time to friends who are not going to reciprocate in kind. And
sometimes we're just in a very bad place ourselves and we grow out of it.
Right. And, and sometimes we're the bad friend. Sometimes we're the uncaring friend, or the friend who's not picking up on cues. So Joss and I thought, someone needs to talk about this, because there are millions of books about romantic relationships, finding them, maintaining them, getting over them. But where are the books for women trying to get over their friends, or trying to heal a relationship, or just recognizing that I shouldn't be giving my time to this person? She's
Right.
really sucking the life out of me. So we very spontaneously started a podcast called Crappy Friends. And we get generally a letter or two each week, that we focus on, and we read it on air and talk about it. And we say, like, what qualifies us to do this? Nothing. We have no credentials to our names. We are just two women who have had a lot of friends, who maintain a lot of friends. I call Joss my best friend, but I would say I probably have 5 best friends,
Right.
and they're all very special and important to me. And I'm also kind of person who puts a lot of time and care into friendships, because I think, like, we have this idea that our romantic partner will be everything to us, and I hear the young kids today, my daughter included, saying, like, I'm going to marry my best friend. And I think you are, in a sense. Don't let your other friends fall to the wayside. You're going, you need more than one person in your life. So I put a high value on my female friendships, and which is not to say I don't value my male friends. It's just different. They're very,
it's always different. Yeah.
Those guys are, like one of my oldest friends is a guy. We grew up next door to each other. And we have to do nothing to maintain that friendship. The fact that he hit me with a wiffle bat when I was 10 has bonded us for life. And
I still have the scar, man.
Right. So we don't need to invest in that or nurture that or anything like that. But women are different. I think women are different.
Yes, they are. Well, it's a wonderful podcast in that it is, again, so much the thing that we all have experienced.
Right.
And it's so relatable because, and I can totally see why people would send letters in, because it's like, I don't get it. Why someone, I've invested in this. I've done these things. I've been a good friend. Yeah. Why is this person not being a good friend back?
Right.
And you're right. There's not much exploration of that. And we as women take that very seriously.
Yeah. I mean,
very hard.
Joss and I have said, sometimes the loss of a friendship is more devastating than a loss of a romantic relationship, because it's not expected. You just, you think like, oh, I'll date a guy and it'll work out or not. But my friend from 8th grade is dumping me. What do I do? My whole world is falling apart. This was not in the lexicon.
I don't think any of us acknowledge the grief of that.
Right.
And, we all have these griefs that we don't process the same way. It's understandable and expected that you grieve a family member or a pet, or, and sometimes that family member, we don't grieve nearly as much as we do the loss of that 8th grade best friend who suddenly turned on us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the confusion over that, but we were in 8th grade together, when you got your period for the first time, I was there, and you think like, well, that was 40 years ago.
Yeah. Well, or the friend that you've traveled with for years to conferences or whatever, and suddenly they're like, yeah, no. Yeah. You're like, wait, what?
Right. And, I think because when I started as a writer, I remember going to my first big conference, Romance Writers of America in Dallas, Texas. And I remember seeing like some of the grande dames of romance walking by and tossing out a hello, and I thought like, I dare not approach them, like for example, Nora Roberts, who is one of the most prolific authors in history, I think, and an absolutely lovely person, but also someone who will tell you to your face, like, look, I don't need more friends. Yeah, I got friends, I'm done.
Got my posse.
And I thought, and I'm not talking specifically about Nora because I didn't know her then, but I just remember thinking like, I never want to be unapproachable. I never want to be like too successful to make friends with somebody in the elevator.
Right.
And I mean that, I'm sincere about that. And I know that I have a reputation for being very approachable and someone who will like give you advice or point you in the right direction if I can, because I've been around now for a long time. But also what happened with that when I started meeting hundreds and then thousands of people a year was that my attitude was sort of like, I will be friends with anyone. I'm not going to be judgmental. I'm not going to be, making anybody feel like they can't sit at this table. However, when it came to like the personal aspect of that, you start to realize like you get to be discerning. You can still be approachable, but you don't have to let everybody in and try to carry the expectations of their friendship. You can mentor people, you can be friendly with people, but you don't have to be everybody's best friend. So I think, for me, what happened was there was a period of years where I was best friends to way too many people, and let people down and was let down. And I didn't vet my friends. We talk about that a lot on the podcast, that, you should vet somebody. You should go slowly. Don't just say like, gosh, we had fun, let's be best friends.
Right.
But women tend to do that. Like, oh my gosh, we just had so much fun at that dinner. and now we're going on a trip together. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's my kid's godmother, and oops, now I find out she's not the person.
Crazy woman.
Yeah. So it's been very rewarding. We also wrote the book, The Crappy Friends, the book, and that's been a real joy to get out in the world and have people read and like give to their nieces and stuff. We say it's like 127 years of therapy in one fun to read book.
I have several people who need that book.
Go ahead, Jeannie.
I'll be passing several of those out for the holidays.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Birthdays along the year in the calendar. Yeah. That's so great. Well, and like we said a few minutes ago, that's not something that's frequently addressed. And yet it's a huge part of our lives as women. And men have those kind of friendships too. They have those kind of male bonding friendships that then suddenly they're like, and I think that's been particularly so over the last few years, where people have been like, do I even know you?
Yeah.
This whole thing that's going on. And so it's probably even more important that we take a look at those things with as much humor and good grace as we possibly can.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's fabulous that you do that. And the podcast is very successful, I know.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's one of those, like we sat down at my kitchen table with a bottle of wine and a microphone and just like, how hard can this be? And so we listened to podcasts. We could do a podcast. So it's very homespun and down to earth. We don't have an engineer or anything like that. We just do it kind of at random. But friendship, female friendship is a very important part of my books too. So it's like a natural link.
Yes.
You have the romantic relationship in most of my stories, if not all of them. And you also have the pet friendship, but you also have a friend, whether it's a good friend or a bad friend, they're going to play a role in the story.
Right.
And there's going to be a history of that friendship and sometimes the difficulties of that friendship. And sometimes they'll be overcome, and sometimes you think like, maybe it's time I just step away.
Yeah.
And one of the Blue Heron books has a particularly difficult friendship in it for Honor. And it was, it was during a time when I was experiencing that idea of like, she would never have done that to me. I saw her do it to 100 people, but like I'm special. And that turns out, no, you're not. So I really enjoy exploring that kind of dynamic in my stories. In Pack Up the Moon, Lauren has a couple of friends who are very important in the story. And, one of them is her best friend from 8th grade, and one of them is her sister. Mm-hmm. And I'm very blessed to have the world's best sister. And, I say to her, she's one of the great loves of my life. My sister, she's 15 months younger. We were treated basically like twins growing up, same bedtime, same room, all that stuff. And it's just another family dynamic that you get to explore, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, growing into something better. Right. It's endlessly fascinating for me.
Well, and you really explored that a lot in terms of family and life and other inconveniences.
Yes.
About families and the dynamics between generations. And what led you to that?
That book, it's funny, you never know what will spark a book. I'm always under contract, so I always know I need to be writing another book, or what will the next book be about. And my family and I went just for lunch one day to this beautiful town in Connecticut called Stonington, Connecticut. And it's on the Atlantic coast. It's the last town before Rhode Island. And it's utterly beautiful and charming. And I saw a house and I thought, that's my next book, is that house. And
how fun.
I didn't know what the story was going to be, but Connecticut is a wealthy state. That part of the state is especially wealthy, especially snooty, And so I thought, I'm going to write about the owner of that house and how she has fucked up her family relationships, starting with her son going to her granddaughter, and then becoming aware of her own mortality and thinking, I kind of want to make amends, but I don't want to admit that I did anything wrong either. So I really loved writing that book because it was tri-generational,
Yeah, yeah. And very highly acclaimed and
Thank you.
very good. So all of you go read it. It's wonderful. What brought you to Always the Last to Know?
Always the Last to Know is also set in that same town.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of friends who were going through a divorce at the time. And I wanted to write about marriage.
Right.
And my editor always says, what's your book about in one word? Which is a horrible question, and she should not be allowed to ask it.
No, she should not. That's just mean.
A journey, a dog. I always fish around, but in this case, I figured out this is a book about marriage, and it's about a bad marriage, but not like an abusive marriage, just a tired marriage. An obligatory marriage, where they're together because they just haven't really decided to divorce yet. It's about how much do you compromise on marriage? How much do you give up of your hopes and dreams for the future in order to be with the right person? And it's about maintaining a happy marriage and the effort that goes into that, and what you might think is important versus what's really important in that marriage. So it's the story of the three Frost women, the mother Barb and her two daughters, Juliet and Sadie, and how they have to come together when the father has a stroke, and a pretty massive stroke. And Barb was just about to divorce him when he had a stroke. And now she's kind of stuck with this guy. And I loved that book. I loved writing John's perspective from this man with a brain injury, and the thoughts and memories that he had, and what he didn't know had happened. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't understand why. And it felt very tender to write that book about these very imperfect people finding their way during a crisis and becoming closer because of it, not without bumps and scrapes. I do like to write realistic books.
Yes, you do. The heartache, but also the coming back into your own as the daughters experience both the mother as a different person.
Right.
Because she's had to step up in this crisis and take charge, and suddenly she's doing things that they've never seen her do.
Right. And she, again, like that idea of we both had the same mother, but we had very different mothers.
Right.
So Juliet is the firstborn, and she has this mother who, was so delighted and felt so lucky to be her mother. And, everything was just wonderful, from the pregnancy to the birth to this delightful child who excels in all areas. And then 12 years later, she gets pregnant again, thinking, she would never have another baby, not wanting to have another baby because she was from a large family. She thought an only child would be the best thing to do. And then she has, a horrible pregnancy and a very difficult labor. And then she has postpartum depression that goes undiagnosed. And she just doesn't bond with Sadie the way she did with Juliet, but she does her best. And so Sadie becomes daddy's girl. And so she has this impression of her dad as like, he's the fun parent. He really gets me. He's so stifled by mom because mom is so, this and that. Whereas Juliet thinks my mom is Wonder Woman. She does everything. She's, she's my hero. And when they all have to come together with these different images of each other, it's really fun to see them bump and scrape and eventually figure things out for the better.
Well, and to me, one of the fascinating things was the perception of, especially with the 12-year gap, the perception of one daughter of both parents and the other daughter of both parents. I'm the youngest of four, so my perspective is completely different
Yeah.
than my oldest brother's perspective.
Yeah.
First of all, there's gender, and second of all, 10 years.
Well, my mom was pregnant when her baby brother was born. She was 21 years older than he was, and she was married a year and having a baby, and her mother had just had a baby. My grandmother was pregnant at my mom's wedding, and she was 42, having her ninth child. She was 20 and she had my mom. So my youngest uncle and my mother had completely different parents. Being the ninth child was easy. If he was missing for 3 days, nobody even noticed. They were just glad, food to go around. Whereas the older kids were under a lot of scrutiny and expectations and stuff like that.
Well, and those of us who are the youngest generally do get away with more. It's true. Because if for no other reason than mom and dad are tired.
Exactly. I know my grandparents were in their 40s when my uncles were, they were grandparents, shortly thereafter. And they had a toddler running around, so it's crazy. Yeah.
But I think in this particular book, the perspective of the two daughters with this gap of time between them and their different experience of their parents, and then having all of that turned on its head by the fathers having the stroke, is a fascinating look at family dynamics.
Thank you. Yeah. It's all really about, it's all about, you can't escape where you came from and how you were raised, for better, for worse.
Right.
And what you can do is reassess and think, these are the things that have happened to me and shaped me. What do I want to do now? Do I want to leave them behind and strike out on my own? Do I want to embrace them? Do I want to reassess them and see perhaps I was wrong about certain things? So it just, like I said, every person has that story, and I want to tell them all.
Well, you come to a new perspective and sort of a different place with Pack Up the Moon.
Yeah.
Because it starts with us already knowing that one of the characters who's a major portion of this book is not going to be with us at the end of the book.
Yeah, she dies in chapter 1. Let's just get it out of the way. Rip up the Band-Aid.
Rip the Band-Aid, tell everybody.
So, I'm a very emotional writer,
Yes, and you are.
And
okay, I just have to know, did you weep your way through writing chapter 1?
God, I was wrecked by this book, sobbing, just like literally curling into fetal position some days and just thinking, like, why am I doing this? Because as an author, you live the experience of your characters. And so this is a book about this wonderful golden couple who finds each other young, and they get married, and they're so lucky and in so many ways. And then they find out that Lauren has a terminal lung disease for which there is no cure. And she has years to live, but how many is kind of a roll of the dice. She knows that she will die from this disease unless there's a major medical breakthrough. And so what do you do with that kind of prognosis? What do you focus on getting every minute of every day that you can possibly get? Or do you concentrate on the life you have now, this day, this week, this month? And what do you do for your spouse? Because you're going to leave him, you're going to ruin him, you're going to die and break his heart. And that's the last thing you ever wanted to do.
Right.
So it's such a difficult topic that I had to write about it. I had to write this story because this is part of the human experience, is loss. And we will all lose someone we love so much. How do you shape your life after that? How do you live with the unlivable? The thing that you would have died yourself to prevent. And people do it every single day. So for me, this book is a story of a very happy marriage. It's a story of how to be happily married under this impending death and how to be happy in that time period, how to really live like you mean it. And you know, Lauren says in one of the opening lines, I'm dying, and this has been the happiest year of my life. And I wanted to explore how that could be, and then also show month by month how you get through loss, how you get through the devastating loss where you think, not only do I never expect to be happy again, I don't even know what happiness looks like at this point. You know, it's a foreign country at this moment. And what Lauren,
that's the I don't want to get out of bed stage.
Yeah. But also just like, you know, the world is gray and dark, and I don't see that changing anytime. I'm just a robot going through the motions. You know, I've not lost my spouse, thank goodness, but I lost my dad at a very tragic way when I was young, and I lost a baby, and so I know heartbreak, and I also know that you can incorporate that heartbreak and make your life better and bigger, and not despite it, but because of it.
Right.
And that's the story I wanted to tell in Pack Up the Moon, and to show how it's done, because we all know it's done, you know, that people get through it and do live great lives afterwards. But how do you get there?
Right.
I guess that's the question, is how do you do it? So this is the story of how it's done for this one couple.
Oh, that's excellent. Now, I know you have a copy of the book there, so maybe you could hold that up.
I will hold it up.
Yes, it's called Pack Up the Moon, and it comes out June 8th, I believe.
Yes,
right?
Yeah. June 8th, 3 days after my daughter gets married.
Oh my word.
I said to my publisher, can we push it back a week? Is there anything we can do? And they're like, I'm so sorry. It's set, it's carved in stone.
I'd really like to be participatory in this release, but not until
then. A little sleepy that first week.
Well, that's it's sort of a wonderful way to celebrate a new book too. You got a great new family member and a great new wedding, and then a great book too coming out.
Thank you. Yes.
Well, this has been absolutely delightful. Have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you about your books and your work, and where are you going next? You always have a book in the pipeline, I know. So
yeah, my next book is about motherhood. You know, that one word that my editor looks for is about mothering in all its different forms. And it's set on Cape Cod, where my family and I have a home that my dad bought when I was a little kid. And I'm very attached to Cape Cod. I spend as much time there as possible. And
I love Cape Cod. Love that place.
My daughter's getting married up there too. So nice. That's the book that right now I'm like, oh, it's a hot mess and I don't want anyone to see it, and nothing will be as good as Pack Up the Moon. But next year at this time, I'll probably be singing a different song.
There you go. Well, we will all look forward to that. Do you have a title for it yet?
It's called Untitled at the moment, Jeannie.
Excellent. That is just so catchy. So catchy. Well, again, thank you so much for being with us here on ConTinual. Why don't you tell everyone where we can find you on social media and your website and all that?
Yes. Okay. My website is KristanHiggins.com, and I'm on Facebook as Kristan Higgins Books, and Twitter as Kristan Higgins, and Instagram as Kristan Higgins. So it's Kristan with an A, but if you Google me under any spelling, I'm sure you'll find me. So.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us on ConTinual. And for all of you out there, thank you for joining us as well.
Thanks, Jeannie.